Go.
All right, welcome everyone. My name is Dr. CJ Delaney, here to introduce Justin Walters. He is majoring in computer science. Also, he's currently a student worker and participant in the CSI START program, where he does computing tutoring. He helps administer the lab and has also worked on several projects. He'll be presenting his paper on the effects of video games on students and analysis. We do ask that you do please hold questions until the end, and also please go on mute and hide your camera just for purposes of less distractions. So go ahead and take it away, Justin.
Thank you, Dr. Delaney. I'm going to now share my PowerPoint for you all as soon as it will share. There we go. Thank you all for joining me. As Dr. Delaney said, I will be presenting my paper, Effects of Video Games on Students and Analysis. First off, what I will be discussing is why I conducted this study and research over all of the research that has been done over the past few decades, a brief history of video games from the very first iteration up to present. Some topics I'll also be covering will be video games linked with aggression, their possible use in education, and their effects on their players. Now, first off, why would I research about video games? My senior project is to create a demonstration of a physics engine. I've created a particle simulation, which you might have seen earlier in the Academic Excellence Day. The link here is that I have also been very active in gaming. It is a major part of my social life. I play very regularly with my friends. It's how I stay connected and how I feel a lot of my generation stays connected. I also have a very personal connection to education and video games in that I had done well after playing video games for a little bit on a test, and that sort of brought the idea to my mind of, could that be part of the reason that I did well on this test? So it led me down to this line of research. Some quick background information on video games. The first video game you could consider would be Pong. Now, the reason there is two dates there is because the first iteration of a Pong-like game was actually done in 1958 at a university by some physics students. They created the first mainframe video game, and then it was officially released as a console video game in 1972. In the 70s, you had your mainframe computers. In the 80s, home consoles started to come out. In the 90s, 3D graphics started to become a bigger thing. In 1992, the first Mortal Kombat was released, which is, as you can see by the bottom middle picture, that is the original Mortal Kombat released in 1992. 1994, the ESRB, the Electronic Software Rating Board, was created. Their purpose was to rate games such as Mortal Kombat and other such electronic software in order to better inform the purchase for the consumers on what they're looking to get. And it was mostly created in response to games such as Mortal Kombat. And then 2000s to the present, there's a much bigger escalation in the realism of games, as you can tell by the picture down below of Mortal Kombat and this picture above, which is of the most recent iteration, Mortal Kombat 11. Now, video games and aggression, there has been a common perception that video games and aggression are highly linked, that playing video games will make you more aggressive. As found in a study done by Dr. Craig A. Anderson in his report, effects of violent video games on aggressive behavior, aggressive cognition, aggressive affect, psychological arousal, and pro-social behavior, a meta-analytic review of the scientific literature. The data below is taken from 35 studies and 24 independent data samples that were analyzed by Dr. Anderson and his associates, in which K is the number of independent correlations, N is the number of participants, R is the pooled coefficient, and CI is the coefficient interval. Now, what is interesting is of the 4 sources of my 25 that I've gathered for my paper, 4 of which find statistical significance between video games and heightened aggression. 3 of which were done and reported by Dr. Craig A. Anderson. I found that to be a little interesting that he is such a prominent figure, it seems, in driving this idea forward. Now, there's also very mixed results in all the scientific community on linking video games and aggression. Now, in another paper reported by Dr. Kuhn, Kluger, Schmein, Wachberg, Witt, and Gallant, does playing violent video games cause aggression? A longitudinal intervention study. They found that by studying 90 participants ranging from age 18 to 45, 48 of which were female, that playing a considered violent video game, Grand Theft Auto, in which murder, theft, and other such actions are commonplace, versus a video game that is considered non-violent, The Sims, which is a video game in which you can create a character, take them through life of getting a job, starting a family, getting an education, so forth, that the aggression levels between both games and the control group, which was given no game to play, were about the same, that there was no significant difference between the 3 groups. Now, where it comes to education is the effect on student grades. In a paper, Games and Simulations by Barasuman and Wilson, they gathered from a class of 40 middle school students that before giving them a video game to play, and then which presented material, they were given a quiz, essentially, a 25-question quiz. And they found that on average, the students did worse pre-video game than they did post-video game, that they tended to retain what material they learned much better than if it was just presented through video games, than if it was just presented to them in a classical fashion. But it was not the case for every student. In a separate study by Dr. Drummer and Sauer, video games do not negatively impact adolescent academic performance in science, mathematics, or reading, as you can see by the table. It was collected from over 192,000 students in over 22 countries involved in the 2009 Program for International Student Assessment. It was found that male students tended to perform slightly better on average in the categories of science and mathematics than their counterparts who did not play video games. While for female students, they tended to perform on average slightly worse in those categories than their counterparts who did not play. I found that to be interesting as well. Now, the other effects video games can have is on their players, which can be they improve their cognitive abilities, such as focus, as found in 2 studies reported in Action Games Expand the Brain's Cognitive Abilities study suggests by the University de Genève. The first study had nearly 9,000 participants from age 6 to 40, and they found that those who played action games such as shooters like Call of Duty versus games like The Sims, as mentioned before, tended to do about half a standard deviation better when it came to cognitive tests, such as improved focus. And even compared to the control group, they did much better. And then they proceeded to repeat this experiment with another 3,000 participants and found similar results, this time only about a third of a standard deviation. In conclusion, based on the small amount of sources that I have analyzed, it is hard to draw any definite answer regarding my inquiry if video games can help improve academic performance. There's a large amount of data out there, and not all of it is consistent in saying, yes, it is beneficial, or no, it is not. And it is hard to make a conclusion based on that inconsistency. Further research would definitely be needed to have a conclusive answer. And I hope that someday in the future, we will be able to have an answer if video games can be a beneficial educational tool for teachers to use. Thank you all for listening. Do you have any questions for me?